Sarah Chun was reviewing mineral extraction reports in her cramped office aboard Mining Station Delta 7 when every screen in the facility flashed red. The universal emergency signal cut through the mundane hum of asteroid processing equipment like a knife through silk. All personnel, this is not a drill, the station's AI announced in its maddeningly calm voice. Unknown vessels detected approaching Earth system. Estimated arrival in 47 hours. Sarah dropped her coffee mug. The ceramic shattered against the metal floor, sending brown liquid splashing across her boots. Around her, the mining station erupted into chaos as 300 workers stopped what they were doing and stared at the nearest screen. The images streaming from Earth's deep space monitoring network showed something that shouldn't exist. 12 massive ships, each one larger than Manhattan, glided through space with impossible grace. Their hulls gleamed like polished obsidian, and strange geometric patterns pulsed across their surfaces with soft blue light. "Jesus Christ," whispered Tommy Reeves, the station's chief engineer. He stood in Sarah's doorway, his weathered face pale. "Those things are beautiful," Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Humanity had been alone in the universe for as long as anyone could remember. Sure, there were theories about alien life, but finding actual proof was different. These ships represented the end of human solitude and the beginning of something entirely unknown. The next 47 hours passed in a blur of preparation and panic. Earth's governments scrambled to coordinate a response, while ordinary people around the world watched their screens with mixtures of fear and wonder. Some religious groups declared it the end times. Others called it humanity's greatest moment. Sarah found herself glued to the news feeds, watching as the alien fleet slowed to a stop just outside Earth's orbit. The ships arranged themselves in a perfect circle, their blue lights pulsing in synchronized patterns that reminded her of a heartbeat. When the first transmission came, it changed everything. The voice that spoke was clearly artificial, filtered through translation software that made it sound hollow and distant. But the words were unmistakably clear. "People of Earth, we are the Kithra. We come seeking sanctuary." The message, repeated in dozens of languages, broadcast on every frequency imaginable. Within hours, Earth's best linguists and xenobiologists were working around the clock to establish better communication. What they learned sent shockwaves through every government on the planet. The Kithra were refugees. Their homeworld, located in a star system 300 light-years away, was dying. A massive stellar event had rendered their planet uninhabitable, and they were the last survivors of their species. 12 ships carrying a total of 50,000 beings, fleeing across the galaxy in search of a new home. They had detected Earth's radio signals decades ago and traveled here hoping to find another intelligent species willing to share space in the galaxy. They weren't conquerors or colonizers. They were simply desperate people looking for somewhere to live. The debate that followed was fierce and divisive. Some world leaders wanted to welcome the aliens with open arms, seeing an opportunity for unprecedented scientific advancement. Others worried about the risks of sharing the solar system with an unknown species. Still others demanded that the Kithra prove their peaceful intentions before any decisions were made. Sarah watched it all unfold from her mining station, feeling increasingly frustrated with the political posturing. Here was first contact with an alien civilization, and Earth's leaders were treating it like a trade negotiation. The Kithra, meanwhile, waited patiently in their circle of ships. They answered every question put to them with remarkable openness. Their technology was more advanced than humanity's, but not overwhelmingly so. They had faster-than-light travel, advanced materials science, and sophisticated biotechnology. But they were still vulnerable to conventional weapons, still dependent on physical resources, still mortal beings facing the same basic challenges of survival. What made them special wasn't their technology. It was their culture. As the weeks of negotiation dragged on, humanity learned that the Kithra were perhaps the most peaceful species imaginable. Their entire civilization was built around concepts of harmony and cooperation. They had eliminated war, poverty, and environmental destruction thousands of years ago. Their art, their philosophy, their entire way of life was dedicated to creating beauty and minimizing suffering. They were, in many ways, what humanity aspired to become. The breakthrough came when Dr. Amanda Foster, Earth's lead xenobiologist, made a startling discovery. The Kithara weren't just refugees from a dying world. They were refugees from something much worse. Hidden in the subtext of their communications, buried in translation errors and cultural misunderstandings, was a terrible truth. The Kithara homeworld hadn't died from natural causes. It had been destroyed by something called the Devourers, a species of aggressive machines that consumed entire solar systems to fuel their expansion. The Kithara had been running from these Devourers for generations, watching as world after world fell to the mechanical plague. Earth wasn't just their destination. It was their last hope. When this information finally reached Earth's leadership, the tone of negotiations changed dramatically. This wasn't just about helping refugees anymore. This was about survival. The Devourers were coming. The Kithara estimated that humanity had perhaps 50 years before the machine swarm reached Earth's solar system. 50 years to prepare for a threat that had destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations. 50 years to learn everything they could from their new alien allies. The vote was unanimous. Earth would grant the Kithara sanctuary. The formal agreement was signed on a cold December morning in Geneva. Representatives from every major nation gathered to witness humanity's first interspecies treaty. Sarah watched the ceremony from her mining station, tears streaming down her face as she realized she was witnessing history. The Kithara ships descended to Earth orbit like falling stars. Their technology integrated seamlessly with human infrastructure. Their knowledge began flowing into human universities and research centers. Their culture started influencing human art and philosophy. It should have been the beginning of a golden age. Instead, it was the beginning of humanity's greatest test. The first Kithara settlement was established in the Australian outback, far from major population centers. The aliens built their structures using advanced manufacturing techniques that seemed almost magical to human observers. Crystalline spires rose from the red earth, connected by bridges that defied gravity and powered by energy sources that human scientists couldn't fully understand. Sarah was among the first humans invited to visit the settlement. She left her mining station and traveled to Earth for the first time in 3 years, her heart pounding with excitement as the transport shuttle descended toward the alien city. What she found there exceeded every expectation. The Kithara were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with elongated limbs and translucent skin that revealed complex patterns of light flowing beneath the surface. Their faces were almost human, but refined to a degree of perfection that seemed impossible. When they moved, it was with a grace that made even the most skilled human dancers look clumsy. But it was their eyes that truly captured her. Large and luminous, filled with an intelligence and compassion that made Sarah feel like she was looking into the souls of angels. "Welcome, Sarah Chun," one of them said as she stepped off the shuttle. The alien's voice was like music, harmonious and warm. "I am Veltar, first speaker for this settlement. We are honored by your presence." Sarah found herself speechless. Standing before this magnificent being, she felt suddenly aware of every flaw in her appearance, every limitation of her species. How could humans ever measure up to such perfection? Veltar seemed to sense her discomfort. "Please, do not diminish yourself in our presence. Your species has already shown us great kindness. That alone makes you beautiful in our eyes." The tour of the settlement that followed was like walking through a dream. The Kithara had created a perfect fusion of technology and nature. Their buildings grew from the earth like living things, their surfaces shifting and adapting to the changing light. Gardens filled with impossible plants created microclimates of perfect temperature and humidity. Art installations responded to the emotions of viewers, changing color and form to reflect the observer's inner state. Everything was designed to promote harmony and well-being. There were no sharp edges, no harsh lights, no uncomfortable spaces. Even the air seemed to smell better here, filled with subtle fragrances that promoted calm and focus. "How do you do it?" Sarah asked as they walked through a market where Kithra artisans displayed their wares. "How do you make everything so perfect?" Veltar paused beside a sculpture that seemed to be made of captured starlight. "We have learned, over many millennia, that beauty and functionality are not opposing forces. When one creates with love and patience, perfection naturally follows. But what about conflict? What about disagreement? These things exist among us, as they do among all thinking beings. But we have learned to resolve them through discourse and compromise rather than violence. We have learned that the goal is not to eliminate differences, but to harmonize them." Sarah nodded, but something nagged at her. "Then, how did the Devourers defeat you? If you're so advanced, so peaceful, how did machines overcome your civilization?" Veltar's luminous eyes dimmed slightly. "Peace, dear Sarah, is not the same as strength. We are skilled at creating beauty and maintaining harmony. We are not skilled at war. When the Devourers came, we had forgotten how to fight. We had spent so long perfecting the arts of creation that we had lost the knowledge of destruction. But surely you try to resist? You must have had some kind of military. We had guardians, yes, protectors whose role was to maintain peace through strength. But they were few in number, and their weapons were designed to subdue rather than destroy. When faced with an enemy that showed no mercy, that could not be reasoned with or deterred, our guardians fell quickly." Veltar led her to a viewing platform overlooking the settlement. In the distance, human and Kithra children played together in a garden designed to stimulate learning and creativity. The sight filled Sarah with hope even as her heart ached for what the aliens had lost. "This is why we value your species so highly," Veltar continued. "Humans possess something that we have spent millennia trying to eliminate from ourselves. You have the capacity for controlled violence, for strategic thinking in the face of mortal threat. You have not forgotten how to fight." Sarah stared at the peaceful scene below. "You think we can succeed where you fail? We think that together we might achieve what neither of our species could accomplish alone. Your warrior's heart combined with our wisdom and technology. Your determination paired with our knowledge of the Devourer's weaknesses." "What weaknesses?" Veltar's expression grew grim. "They are machines, but they are not omnipotent. They can be destroyed, but only through methods that require a willingness to sacrifice, to accept loss in service of a greater goal. This is something our people lost long ago in our pursuit of perfect harmony." As the sun set over the alien settlement, painting the crystalline spires in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah began to understand the true nature of the bargain humanity had made. The Kithra hadn't just come seeking sanctuary. They had come seeking warriors. The question was whether humanity was ready to become what the galaxy needed them to be. That night, Sarah stood on the observation deck of her guest quarters, staring up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were coming. Mechanical predators that had consumed dozens of worlds, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. In 50 years, they would arrive at Earth. 50 years to prepare for war against an enemy that had never known defeat. 50 years to prove that humanity deserved the gift the Kithra had given them. Sarah smiled grimly and began making plans for her return to the mining stations. If humanity was going to fight, they would need resources. Lots of them. The Kithra had shown them kindness once. Now it was time for humanity to return the favor in the only way they knew how. With blood, iron, and the unbreakable determination of species that had clawed its way to the stars despite every obstacle the universe had thrown at them. The war for Earth's survival was about to begin. 25 years had passed since the Kithra arrived, and humanity had transformed itself into something unrecognizable. Commander Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's first true warship, and watched the massive construction yards of Mars orbit through the reinforced viewports. Thousands of vessels in various stages of completion floated in the red planet's gravitational embrace, their hulls gleaming with the same crystalline armor technology the Kythera had shared. But these weren't Kythera ships. These were human designs, built for human crews, incorporating 25 years of hybrid technology that neither species could have developed alone. Status report, Lieutenant Hayes. Marcus commanded, his eyes never leaving the industrial ballet playing out before them. Sir, Production Yard 7 has completed hull construction on the Vengeance-class destroyer UES Retribution. Yard 12 is finishing weapons integration on the carrier UES Indomitable. Overall fleet readiness stands at 63%. Marcus nodded grimly. 63%. After a quarter-century of the most intensive military buildup in human history, they still weren't ready. The Devourers would arrive in exactly 25 years, and humanity needed every single day to prepare. The transformation hadn't been easy. When the Kythera first shared their knowledge of the approaching threat, many humans had reacted with disbelief, then despair. How could one species, barely capable of interplanetary travel, hope to defeat an enemy that had consumed entire galactic sectors? The answer, it turned out, lay in humanity's greatest weakness becoming its greatest strength. While the Kythera had spent millennia perfecting peace, humans had spent millennia perfecting war. Every conflict, every battle, every strategic innovation in human history had been building toward this moment. The species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and 2 world wars was uniquely equipped to face the ultimate existential threat. Marcus remembered the early days of the preparation, when he'd been a young lieutenant fresh out of the Sol Defense Academy. The Kythera had provided detailed intelligence on Devourer technology and tactics, information gathered from countless civilizations that had fallen before the mechanical swarm. What emerged from those intelligence briefings was a picture of an enemy unlike anything in human experience. The Devourers weren't a species in any traditional sense. They were a self-replicating technological plague that converted all matter in a star system into more of themselves. They consumed planets, moons, asteroids, even stellar material to fuel their endless expansion. Their ships were massive, city-sized constructs bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Their smaller units were fast, adaptive, and capable of rapid evolution to counter new threats. They had no fear, no mercy, no concept of surrender. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next system. Previous civilizations had tried to fight them with conventional tactics, and all had failed. The Kythera themselves had lasted longer than most, using their advanced technology to slow the Devourer's advance. But even they had eventually been forced to flee. Humanity needed a different approach. Sir, incoming transmission from Fleet Command, Lieutenant Hayes announced, breaking Marcus from his thoughts. Put it through. Admiral Elena Vasquez's weathered face appeared on the main screen. She had been Fleet Admiral for 15 years, having taken command after her predecessor died during the testing of an experimental weapon system. The stress of preparing for an impossible war had aged her considerably, but her eyes still burned with determination. Marcus, how's the inspection going? We're behind schedule, Admiral, but the quality is exceptional. These new hybrid drives are performing beyond specifications. The Kythera bioneural computing systems have increased our reaction times by 40%. Good, because I have news that's going to complicate our timeline. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Devourers? Long-range sensors have detected their advanced scouts. They're still 24 years out, but they're moving faster than the Kythera projected. We might have as little as 22 years before the main force arrives. 22 years. Marcus did the math automatically. Current production schedules would give them approximately 70% fleet readiness by then. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Admiral, what are our options? We accelerate everything. I'm authorizing the activation of Protocol 7. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Protocol 7 was the contingency plan they'd hoped never to use. It meant converting civilian infrastructure to military production, conscripting every available person for the war effort, and fundamentally transforming human society into a military machine. Admiral, that's going to cause massive social disruption. The civilian governments won't stand for it. Vasquez's expression was grim. The civilian governments don't have a choice. I'm declaring a state of existential emergency. As of today, every human being in the solar system is a soldier in the war against extinction. The transmission ended, leaving Marcus staring at the construction yards with new eyes. What he saw there would soon be humanity's entire reason for existence. The implementation of Protocol 7 was swift and brutal. Within weeks, every major corporation had been nationalized and converted to military production. Civilian space travel was suspended except for essential personnel. Educational systems were restructured to focus on engineering, weapons design, and military tactics. Humanity didn't just prepare for war. It became war. The Kithara watched this transformation with a mixture of awe and horror. They had helped create this monster by sharing their knowledge and technology, but they couldn't help but be disturbed by the speed with which humanity abandoned its peaceful pursuits. Marcus found himself at the center of these changes when he was promoted to admiral and given command of the Prometheus fleet, humanity's first fully operational battle group. His ships were technological marvels, combining Kithara crystalline technology with human engineering ingenuity. The UES Prometheus itself was a sight to behold. 2 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that could shatter asteroids, it was powered by a hybrid fusion crystal reactor that generated more energy than some stars. Its armor was grown rather than manufactured, using Kithara biotechnology to create hull plating that could adapt to different types of damage. But for all their technological advancement, Marcus knew that technology alone wouldn't win this war. They needed strategy, tactics, and the kind of desperate creativity that only came from fighting for survival. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Dr. Sarah Chun, the mining engineer who had been among the first humans to visit the Kithara settlement, had spent the intervening years developing new extraction technologies. Her work had focused on asteroid mining, but she'd recently made a discovery that changed everything. The Devourers have a weakness, she announced at a strategy meeting attended by the solar system's top military minds. They're too efficient. Admiral Vasquez leaned forward. Explain. Sarah activated a holographic display showing Devourer ship configurations. Every previous civilization tried to fight them head-on, matching their technology with defensive systems. But look at how they operate. They consume everything in a star system, converting it all to usable material. They leave nothing behind. That doesn't sound like weakness, commented General Morrison, the head of ground forces. If you think about it strategically, Sarah continued. They're like a perfect biological organism, but that means they have no redundancy, no waste, no excess capacity. Every part of their force is optimally configured for their current mission. Marcus began to see where she was going. You're suggesting we force them to adapt faster than they can handle. Exactly. The Kithara told us the Devourers can evolve their technology rapidly, but that process takes time and resources. If we can force them to constantly readjust their configurations, we can create inefficiencies in their system. How do we do that? Sarah smiled, and Marcus was reminded of the young woman who had first visited an alien settlement 25 years ago. But this Sarah was harder, tempered by decades of preparing for war. We don't fight them like the Kithara did, with elegant solutions and minimal casualties. We fight them like humans. Dirty, chaotic, unpredictable. We make them adapt to so many different threats that they can't optimize for any of them. The strategy that emerged from Sarah's insight was revolutionary. Instead of building a few powerful ships to match the Devourer's city-size constructs, humanity would deploy thousands of smaller vessels with wildly different capabilities. Some would use energy weapons, others kinetic projectiles, still others exotic technologies borrowed from Kithara science. But The real genius was in the unpredictability. Human tactics would change constantly, incorporating everything from ancient military strategies to cutting-edge technological warfare. They would use deception, misdirection, and asymmetric attacks. They would fight like pirates and generals like guerrillas and admirals like every warrior culture humanity had ever produced. The Devourers would face an enemy that refused to follow any logical pattern of resistance. Implementation of this strategy required a fundamental restructuring of human military doctrine. The old concepts of standardized equipment and predictable tactics were thrown out in favor of adaptive chaos. Every ship captain was trained in dozens of different combat styles. Every fleet was equipped with multiple weapon systems that could be swapped out based on battlefield conditions. Marcus found himself at the heart of these preparations, working 18-hour days to train crews and test new technologies. The stress was enormous, but it was balanced by the knowledge that humanity was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. They were becoming a species specifically designed to destroy an unstoppable enemy. The psychological toll on human society was severe. Birth rates plummeted as resources were diverted to military production. Art and culture stagnated as creative minds were redirected toward weapons design. Entire generations grew up knowing they would spend their lives preparing for a war that might never come. But there were also unexpected benefits. The technological advancement was staggering. Human science progressed at an unprecedented rate as they absorbed and built upon Kithra knowledge. Medical technology eliminated most diseases. Energy production became essentially unlimited. Space travel evolved from a dangerous adventure to routine transportation. The Kithra themselves benefited from these changes. Their own technology advanced as they collaborated with human engineers who approached problems from completely different angles. For the first time in millennia, they began developing new weapons systems, drawing on human military expertise to create defenses they could never have imagined. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The two species began to merge in ways that surprised everyone. Human children learned Kithra philosophy alongside military strategy. Kithra youth studied human history and military tactics. Intermarriage became common, producing offspring that combined the best traits of both species. Marcus witnessed this cultural fusion firsthand when he married Selana, a Kithra scientist working on advanced shield technology. Their wedding was attended by beings from both species, conducted in a ceremony that blended human traditions with Kithra rituals. "Do you think we can win?" Selana asked him on their wedding night, as they stood on the observation deck of their honeymoon transport, watching the lights of Mars's orbital shipyards. Marcus considered the question seriously. In the past decade, he had seen humanity accomplish impossible things. They had built a fleet larger than anyone thought possible. They had developed weapons that could theoretically damage Devourer vessels. They had created a military machine unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "I think we can make them pay for every system they try to take," he said finally. "Whether we can stop them completely, we'll find out in 22 years. Selana nodded. Her bioluminescent markings pulsintoi. My people have grown used to running from this threat. It feels strange to finally be standing and fighting." "Running isn't always cowardice," Marcus replied. "Sometimes it's the smartest tactical choice. Your people preserve themselves long enough to find allies. Now we fight together." As if summoned by their conversation, a new ship passed by their viewport. It was one of the latest designs, a hybrid vessel that incorporated the best of both species' technologies. Its hull gleamed with Kithra biocrystal plating, but its weapons were purely human in their brutal efficiency. The ship's name was clearly visible on its hull, UES Harmony's End. It was a perfect symbol of what humanity and the Kithra had become together. Beautiful and terrible, peaceful and warlike, a fusion of two species that complemented each other's strengths while compensating for each other's weaknesses. The Devourers were coming, but they would find Earth defended by something they had never encountered before. Two civilizations that had learned to fight as one. The preparation was nearly complete. Soon, it would be time for the real test to begin. The first Devourer scout ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system on a Tuesday, exactly 50 years after the Kythera had arrived seeking sanctuary. Admiral Marcus Rivera, now gray-haired and bearing the weight of 5 decades of preparation, watched the long-range sensor readings with grim satisfaction. The enemy had finally come. Devourer vessel confirmed, reported Captain Lisa Park, his tactical officer. Configuration matches Kythera intelligence reports. Length approximately 800 meters. Mass estimated at 4 million tons. It's conducting what appears to be systematic scans of the outer system. Marcus nodded. This was exactly what they had expected. The scout was mapping the system's resources, identifying targets for the main fleet that would follow. According to Kythera intelligence, they had perhaps 6 months before the full Devourer armada arrived. Status of the welcoming committee? Marcus asked. Stealth Squadron Whisper is in position, sir. They're maintaining radio silence 2 million kilometers from the target. Excellent. Order them to proceed with Operation Mousetrap. The plan they were about to execute had been refined over decades of preparation. Rather than immediately destroying the scout ship, they would allow it to gather some intelligence while carefully controlling what it could observe. The Devourers would learn that Earth was inhabited and defended, but they wouldn't discover the true extent of humanity's preparations. More importantly, humanity would learn how modern Devourer technology operated in combat. The attack began with surgical precision. 3 stealth frigates, their hulls coated with Kythera bioadaptive camouflage, moved into position around the alien scout. Their approach was undetectable, using gravitational fields to mask their engine signatures and advanced metamaterials to avoid sensor detection. Whisper leader to command came the voice of Captain Elena Santos over the encrypted comm channel. Target is locked. Initiating Phase 1. The first shots were designed to disable rather than destroy. Focused particle beams severed the scout's communication arrays while electromagnetic pulses disrupted its sensor networks. Within seconds, the Devourer vessel found itself isolated and partially blind. The response was immediate and terrifying. The scout ship transformed before their eyes. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, reconfiguring itself from an exploration vessel into a combat configuration. Weapons pods erupted from its surface while defensive shields snapped into existence with brilliant flashes of energy. Jesus Christ, Captain Santos whispered over the comm, the whole thing just shape-shifted. Confirmed visual on adaptive reconstruction, Marcus said calmly, though his pulse had spiked. They had known the Devourers could modify their ships rapidly, but seeing it happen was still shocking. Continue with Phase 2. The human ships opened fire with their primary weapons, a combination of plasma cannons and kinetic projectiles that had been specifically designed to test Devourer defenses. The results were both encouraging and alarming. The Devourer shields absorbed the energy weapons completely, but the kinetic rounds punched through and caused significant damage to the hull. The alien vessel responded by launching a cloud of smaller units that moved with impossible agility through space. Drone deployment confirmed, Captain Park reported. Estimated 200 units, each approximately fighter-sized. They're moving to intercept our stealth ships. Phase 3, Marcus ordered. This was where human tactical innovation came into play. Instead of engaging the drones in conventional combat, the stealth frigates scattered and began executing a pattern of movement that seemed completely random. They fired sporadically, targeted different systems, and generally behaved like panic-driven amateurs. But there was method to the madness. Each apparently random action was designed to force the Devourer systems to adapt to a new threat profile. The alien drones, programmed to counter logical tactical patterns, found themselves constantly adjusting their responses to meet threats that vanished as soon as they were identified. Target confusion confirmed, Captain Santos reported. The drones are chasing shadows. Their response algorithms can't lock onto our pattern because we don't have one. Excellent. Initiate Phase 4. Phase 4 was the real test. One of the stealth frigates, the UES Shadow's Edge, deliberately allowed itself to be caught by the Devourer drones. As the alien units closed in for what they assumed would be an easy kill, Shadow's Edge revealed its true nature. The frigate's hull opened like a flower, releasing dozens of smaller craft that had been concealed within its structure. But these weren't ordinary fighters. They were hybrid vessels combining human engineering with Kythera biotechnology, each one equipped with different weapon systems and programmed with completely different tactical behaviors. Some fired energy weapons while others used kinetic rounds. Some attacked in formation while others operated as lone wolves. Some targeted the scout ship while others focused on the drones. Within minutes, the Devourer forces found themselves facing what appeared to be 6 different enemy types with incompatible tactical doctrines. The result was chaos on a level that machine intelligence couldn't process effectively. Devourer response, coordination breaking down. Captain Park reported with barely concealed excitement. Their units are interfering with each other. Some drones are targeting friendly forces because they can't distinguish between human tactical signatures. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. 50 years of preparation were paying off. The key to fighting the Devourers wasn't superior technology. It was superior confusion. Begin Phase 5. Let's see how they handle the impossible. Phase 5 pushed the limits of what the Devourer scout could comprehend. The human forces began using tactics that violated conventional military logic. Ships fired at empty space, then hit targets with delayed effect weapons that traveled through folded space. Fighters deliberately crashed into asteroids, only to reveal that they were kamikaze drones carrying massive explosives. Energy signatures appeared in multiple locations simultaneously, suggesting technologies that shouldn't exist. The Devourer scout ship, designed to analyze and counter logical threats, began making increasingly erratic decisions. Its drones started attacking each other. Its weapons fired at phantom targets. Its shields fluctuated as the ship's processors struggled to handle data that didn't fit any known pattern. "Sir," Captain Park said quietly, "the target appears to be experiencing some kind of system failure. Its responses are becoming increasingly irrational." Marcus nodded. This was exactly what Sarachon had predicted. Force a perfectly optimized system to handle too many variables, and it would collapse under the weight of its own efficiency. All units, execute final phase. The human forces suddenly stopped their chaotic behavior and attacked with perfect coordination. Every ship, every drone, every weapon fired simultaneously at precisely calculated targets. The Devourer scout, its defensive systems completely overwhelmed by contradictory data, couldn't respond effectively. The alien vessel died in a burst of brilliant light that briefly outshone the distant sun. Target destroyed, Captain Santos reported. All human units reporting minimal damage. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 50 years of preparation finally lifting from his shoulders. They had done it. They had destroyed a Devourer vessel using tactics that no previous civilization had tried. But he also knew this was just the beginning. "All units return to base," he ordered. "We have 5 months to prepare for their friends." The analysis of the battle took weeks. Every moment of combat was studied, every tactical decision examined, every piece of data scrutinized by teams of human and Kythera experts. What they learned was both encouraging and terrifying. The encouraging news was that their strategy worked. Chaos-based tactics could indeed overwhelm Devourer adaptive systems. The aliens were so optimized for logical warfare that they couldn't handle truly random opposition. The terrifying news was that the scout ship had managed to transmit a significant amount of data before its destruction. The main Devourer fleet now knew that Sol system was inhabited by an intelligent species with advanced military capabilities. More importantly, they knew that this species had destroyed one of their scouts. The next group won't be a single reconnaissance vessel. warned Veltar during a strategy meeting in the depths of Earth's primary military command center. The aging Kithra had become one of humanity's most trusted advisors, his people's long experience with the Devourers invaluable in planning their defense. "How many ships should we expect?" asked Admiral Vasquez, now the Supreme Commander of Sol Defense Forces. "Based on previous encounters, the Devourers will likely send a preliminary assault force of 50 to 100 vessels. They will be testing your defenses while gathering intelligence on your capabilities. If you can repel this force, they will send increasingly larger fleets until they determine the optimal force configuration to completely overwhelm your resistance." Marcus studied the tactical displays showing the current disposition of human forces. 50 years of intensive military buildup had given them approximately 8,000 combat vessels of various sizes, plus countless defensive installations throughout the system. It sounded impressive, but previous civilizations had fielded larger forces and still fallen. "What's the largest fleet they've ever sent against a single system?" he asked. Veltar's bioluminescent markings dimmed with sorrow. "Against my homeworld, they eventually deployed over 10,000 ships. But that was after we had resisted for nearly a century. Most civilizations fall to much smaller forces. Then we need to make sure they underestimate us initially," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Let them think we're just another typical resistance force." Admiral Vasquez nodded. "We hide our true capabilities and reveal them gradually. Make them commit larger and larger forces until we can deliver a decisive blow." "Exactly. But we also need to be prepared for the possibility that even our best efforts won't be enough. What's our contingency plan if Earth falls?" The question hung in the air like a funeral shroud. Despite 50 years of preparation, despite the advantages of hybrid technology and chaos tactics, there was still a very real possibility that humanity would join the long list of civilizations consumed by the Devourers. "The colony's ships," Admiral Vasquez said quietly. "If we can't hold the system, we evacuate as many people as possible and scatter them to other star systems. Make sure that some humans and Kithra survive to continue the fight." Marcus nodded, though the thought of abandoning Earth filled him with rage. This world had become home to both species. The idea of surrendering it to mechanical predators was almost unbearable. "Sir," Captain Park interrupted, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha 7. "Put it through." The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to Captain James Wright, commander of humanity's most distant early warning outpost. He looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Admiral, we've detected massive hyperspace distortions at the edge of our sensor range. Based on the energy signatures, we estimate between 60 and 80 large vessels. They'll reach the system in approximately 4 months." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. 4 months instead of 5. The Devourers were coming faster than expected, probably accelerated by their desire to avenge their destroyed scout. "Confirmed ship classifications?" "Mixed force, sir. We're seeing what appear to be assault cruisers, support vessels, and at least a dozen city ship class constructs. This isn't a reconnaissance force. This is an invasion fleet." Admiral Vasquez stood up from her chair, her expression grim but determined. "All stations, initiate Defense Protocol Alpha. This is not a drill. All personnel report to battle stations immediately." Throughout the Sol system, humanity's greatest military achievement sprang into action. Hidden weapons platforms revealed themselves. Camouflaged ships powered up their engines. Orbital defense stations extended their armor plating and charged their weapon systems. The preparation phase was over. The war for Earth's survival had officially begun. Marcus looked around the command center at the faces of the people who would determine humanity's fate. Humans and Kithra working side by side, united in their determination to protect their shared home. 50 years ago, they had been 2 separate species facing an impossible threat. Now there was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. They were the last hope of every civilization the Devourers had consumed. The final roll of the dice in a game where the stakes were the survival of intelligent life itself. In 4 months, they would discover whether 50 years of preparation had been enough. The Devourers were coming, and Earth would not run. The Devourer invasion fleet dropped out of hyperspace like harbingers of the apocalypse. Admiral Marcus Rivera watched from the bridge of the UES Defiance as 87 alien vessels materialized in the outer system, their massive hulls blotting out entire star fields. The largest among them were true city ships, each one capable of housing millions of mechanical beings, and equipped with weapons that could shatter moons. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Chun, the daughter of the mining engineer who had first visited the Kythera settlement 75 years ago. "They're enormous." Marcus nodded grimly. The intelligence reports hadn't adequately conveyed the sheer scale of Devourer technology. These weren't just ships. They were mobile factories, weapons platforms, and colony vessels all combined in a single construct that defied human comprehension. Fleet Disposition Report. He ordered, forcing himself to focus on tactics rather than the overwhelming nature of their enemy. "All human and Kythera vessels are in position," reported Captain Park, now his chief of staff after decades of service together. Total friendly forces number 8,247 combat vessels, 15,000 automated defense platforms, and approximately 200,000 fighter-class units. It sounded impressive until you compared it to what they were facing. Each Devourer city ship likely carried more firepower than half the human fleet combined. "Sir," called the communications officer, "the Devourers are transmitting on all frequencies. Let's hear what they have to say." The voice that filled the command center was mechanical and emotionless, filtered through translation protocols that made it sound like the whisper of death itself. "Inhabitants of this star system, you have destroyed one of our vessels. This act of aggression cannot be forgiven. You will surrender all military assets and submit to absorption into our collective. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of all worlds in this system. You have one solar rotation to comply." Marcus felt a cold smile cross his lips. "Send them our reply." The response had been crafted by Earth's best diplomats and military strategists, designed to convey humanity's position with crystal clarity. "Devourer Fleet, this is Admiral Marcus Rivera of the Sol Defense Forces. We have received your ultimatum and respectfully decline. Come and take what you can." The transmission ended, and Marcus could almost feel the alien fleet's attention focusing on his position like a targeting laser. "All units," he announced on the fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Rivera. Today we fight not just for our homes, but for every civilization the Devourers have destroyed. We carry the hopes of countless worlds that fell before us. Make them count." The battle began at the edge of the system, where humanity's fastest vessels engaged the Devourer advanced scouts. These initial skirmishes were carefully choreographed to appear desperate while actually gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities. What they learned was both fascinating and terrifying. The Devourers had evolved significantly since their encounters with the Kythera. Their adaptive technology was faster, their weapons more powerful, their tactical coordination nearly perfect. But they were still machines following logical programming. "Phase 1 complete," reported Admiral Vasquez from her command ship in the asteroid belt. "The enemy has taken the bait. They're advancing with a standard formation, assuming we're using conventional defensive tactics." Marcus studied the tactical display. The Devourers were moving through the system in a methodical pattern, establishing control zones and eliminating resistance with overwhelming firepower. It was the same approach they had used against dozens of other civilizations. They had no idea what was waiting for them. "Initiate Operation Pandora," Marcus commanded. Throughout the solar system, humanity's true defensive strategy revealed itself. What the Devourers had assumed were random defensive positions suddenly coordinated into a web of overlapping kill zones. Hidden weapons platforms emerged from behind asteroids and moons. camouflage ships dropped their stealth fields and began attacking from impossible angles. But the real surprise was the nature of the attacks themselves. Human forces didn't engage the Devourers in conventional battle. Instead, they implemented the chaos warfare doctrine that had been refined over 50 years of preparation. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical unit operated according to different principles, creating a kaleidoscope of conflicting military strategies that defied analysis. Some human vessels attacked like ancient Terran submarines, striking from concealment and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Others fought like medieval knights, charging directly at enemy formations with weapons blazing. Still others adopted tactics borrowed from insect swarms, coordinating thousands of small attacks that individually meant nothing, but collectively created devastating cumulative damage. The Devourer fleet, programmed to adapt to enemy tactics through logical analysis, found itself facing an enemy that had no consistent tactics to analyze. Enemy response coordination is breaking down, reported Captain Park with barely concealed excitement. Their formations are becoming increasingly erratic. Some units are engaging targets that don't exist. Others are ignoring obvious threats. Marcus nodded, but he knew this was just the beginning. The Devourers were adaptive. They would eventually find a way to counter even chaos-based tactics. Signal the Kythera contingent, he ordered. It's time for the next phase. The Kythera had spent 50 years learning warfare from humanity's greatest military minds. But they had also contributed their own unique perspective to the art of combat. What emerged was a fusion of human aggression and Kythera precision that created something entirely new. Kythera vessels moved through the battle with impossible grace, their biocrystalline hulls shifting and adapting in real time to optimize their performance. Their weapons were works of art that happened to be lethally effective, firing coherent energy that could slip through gaps in enemy shields like water through cracks. But more importantly, they provided the coordination that made human chaos tactics truly effective. While human ships attacked with apparent randomness, Kythera battle coordinators ensured that the randomness served strategic purposes. The result was controlled chaos that maximized damage while minimizing predictability. The first Devourer city ship died 3 hours into the battle. The massive construct, overwhelmed by thousands of small attacks from every conceivable angle, suffered cascading system failures as its adaptive technology tried to counter threats faster than its processors could handle. When its main reactor finally destabilized, the explosion created a brief artificial star that temporarily blinded sensors across half the solar system. First kill confirmed, announced Admiral Vasquez, her voice tight with emotion. City ship Alpha Prime is destroyed. A cheer went up across the human fleet, but Marcus remained focused on the tactical display. One down, but dozens more remained, and the Devourers were beginning to adapt. Sir, Captain Park said urgently, the enemy is changing their approach. They're abandoning formation combat and switching to individual vessel tactics. Marcus cursed under his breath. This was what they had feared. Once the Devourers stopped trying to coordinate their forces and instead allowed each ship to adapt independently, they became much more dangerous. Signal all units to implement strategy Omega. It's time to show them what we really learned from 50 years of preparation. Strategy Omega was humanity's ultimate gambit. Instead of trying to outthink the Devourers or rely on superior technology, it leveraged humanity's greatest strength, the ability to make decisions that no rational mind would ever consider. Human ships began implementing suicide tactics that should have been suicidal, but somehow worked. Fighters loaded with antimatter warheads flew directly into Devourer weapons fire, using the explosions to mask their approach until they could deliver killing blows. Destroyers allowed themselves to be captured by enemy tractor beams, then self-destructed inside Devourer shield perimeters. Capital ships rammed enemy vessels at velocities that should have destroyed both combatants, but were calculated to leave the human ship barely intact while completely destroying the alien vessel. It was warfare at its most primal level. Not the elegant application of superior technology, but the raw determination of a species fighting for its survival with whatever weapons came to hand. The Devourers, programmed to analyze and counter rational threats, had no framework for dealing with an enemy that willingly embraced strategies that logic said should fail. Enemy adaptation rate falling below threshold, reported the tactical AI. Devourer units are experiencing decision paralysis when facing illogical threats. But the cost was enormous. Human casualties mounted as ships implemented increasingly desperate tactics. Entire squadrons vanished in brilliant flashes as they executed maneuvers that pushed the boundaries of physics and sanity. Marcus watched good people die implementing strategies that shouldn't work and felt the weight of command crushing down on him. But he also saw Devourer ships falling at an unprecedented rate as their enemy simply couldn't adapt fast enough to counter human unpredictability. The turning point came when Captain Elena Santos, now commanding the heavy cruiser UES Vengeance, made a decision that defined the entire battle. Her ship was badly damaged, surrounded by 3 Devourer assault vessels that were systematically destroying her defenses. By any logical analysis, her situation was hopeless. The rational choice was to withdraw and preserve her crew for future engagements. Instead, she did something that no computer could have predicted. She opened fire on a nearby moon. The massive barrage of weapons fire destabilized the moon's orbit, sending it careening toward the Devourer ships at velocities that would have been impossible to achieve through normal propulsion. The alien vessels, their tactical systems focused on threats that made sense, didn't recognize the danger until it was too late. All 3 Devourer ships were crushed by millions of tons of lunar debris traveling at orbital velocity. Vengeance actual to all units, Santos announced calmly over the comm system. Sometimes the best weapon is the one nobody expects you to use. Her example inspired increasingly creative tactics throughout the fleet. Human commanders began using everything from solar radiation to gravitational fields as weapons. They turned asteroid belts into kinetic bombardment systems and converted space stations into guided missiles. The Devourers, faced with an enemy that turned the entire solar system into a weapon, finally began to experience something they had never encountered before: doubt. Their perfect efficiency faltered as they tried to analyze threats that included the very space around them. Their adaptive technology, designed to counter logical military evolution, couldn't process the tactical innovations of a species that had spent millennia learning to fight with whatever was available. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chun, now in her 80s but still brilliant, had spent the battle analyzing Devourer communication patterns from a research station on Mars. What she discovered changed everything. "Admiral," she announced over the secure channel, "I've found their weakness. The Devourers aren't just machines. They're network machines. They share information instantaneously across their entire fleet." "We knew that, Sarah. It's part of what makes them so dangerous." "Yes, but it also means they're vulnerable to information warfare. If we can feed false data into their network," Marcus understood immediately, "we can make them think we're doing things we're not actually doing." "Exactly. But more than that, we can make them think their own ships are doing things they're not actually doing." The plan that emerged was elegantly simple and completely insane. Using captured Devourer communication protocols, human technicians began broadcasting false sensor data into the alien network. The Devourers suddenly found themselves receiving information suggesting that their own ships were attacking each other. Their logical response was to counter these attacks, which meant they actually began attacking each other. Within hours, the massive Devourer fleet was tearing itself apart as ships followed programming that told them to defend against threats that didn't exist by attacking allies who weren't actually enemies. "Enemy fleet coordination has completely collapsed," Captain Park reported with amazement. "They're firing on their own units. Several city ships are engaging each other with main batteries." Marcus watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. After 50 years of preparation, countless sacrifices, and innovations that pushed the boundaries of military science, they had found the ultimate weakness of perfect efficiency. It could be fooled into destroying itself. The battle ended not with a climactic confrontation, but with the gradual realization that the Devourer fleet was gone. Some ships had been destroyed by human forces. Others had been eliminated by their own allies. A few had simply shut down as their programming became so corrupted they could no longer function. The greatest military threat in galactic history had been defeated by controlled chaos and creative lying. "Admiral," Captain Park said quietly, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from the remaining Devourer units." Marcus blinked. Surrender? They can do that. Apparently. The ships that are still functional are requesting to be shut down rather than continue operating with corrupted programming. They're asking us to turn them off. For a moment, Marcus felt an unexpected surge of pity for their enemy. The Devourers had been perfect machines designed for an imperfect universe. When they finally encountered a species that embraced imperfection as a strategy, their perfection became a liability. "Grant their request," he ordered, "but scan every ship thoroughly before we approach. I want to make sure this isn't some kind of trap." The aftermath of the battle took months to fully process. Human and Kithra forces had lost nearly 40% of their vessels, and tens of thousands of people had died implementing tactics that no sane military doctrine would have endorsed. But they had won. Against odds that defied calculation, they had defeated an enemy that had consumed entire galactic sectors. The victory celebration was muted by grief for the fallen, but it was also infused with something that neither species had felt in generations: hope for the future. "What happens now?" asked Veltar as he and Marcus stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Mars orbital station, watching salvage crews process the remains of Devourer vessels. "Now we learn," Marcus replied. "We study their technology, understand their weaknesses, and prepare to help other civilizations defend themselves. The Devourers aren't gone completely. There are other fleets, other invasions happening across the galaxy. You want to take the fight to them?" Marcus nodded. "The Kithra showed us kindness when we needed it most. Now it's our turn to return that favor to species we've never met, fighting battles we know nothing about." Veltar's bioluminescent markings pulsed with what Marcus had learned to recognize as profound emotion. "My people spent millennia running from this threat. We never imagined it could be stopped. It could be stopped, but not by perfect tactics or superior technology. It can be stopped by beings willing to embrace chaos, to make irrational decisions, to fight with whatever weapons they can find or create. You want to teach other species to fight like humans." Marcus smiled grimly. "I want to teach them to fight like themselves. Every species has its own form of controlled chaos. We just need to help them find it." As they watched, a new ship passed by the station. It was a hybrid design incorporating the best elements of human and Kithra technology, but it bore markings that neither species had seen before. The salvaged Devourer vessels were already being converted into ships for the new fleet they were building. The ship's name was clearly visible on its hull: UES Liberation. It was the first vessel of humanity's new mission, carrying the weapons of chaos to every corner of the galaxy where the Devourers threatened intelligent life. The war for Earth was over. The war for the galaxy was about to begin. But for the first time in galactic history, the Devourers would face an enemy that couldn't be analyzed, predicted, or countered through logical adaptation. They would face the children of two species who had learned that sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem was to refuse to accept that it was impossible. The Kithra had helped humanity once, sharing their knowledge and technology when Earth needed it most. Now humanity was ready to return the favor to every threatened world in the galaxy. The age of perfect predators was ending. The age of chaotic defenders had begun.